All right, good evening, folks. Good to see so many folks here, so many familiar faces. My name is Pat Christmas, one of the Open Awards Philly Steering Committee members. Here with at least a few of my colleagues. Actually, want to do a quick introduction just of the steering committee folks. I see the two Vanessas.
Sure, I'll say, yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. 1 week out from Election Day. Very exciting. Happy y'all are here. I'm a committee person, the 5th Ward, 5th Division, for at least another week. We'll see. and I serve on the administration committee with Pat.
Hi. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. I'm Mike Swayze. I'm on the communications subcommittee and also a committee person in the 22nd Ward and part of the 22nd Ward Open Caucus. And excuse me for my screen, but it has been acting up for months now. My claim to fame is that this is really a smoke-filled room that I'm in, so beg my pardon.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Fields. I'm a committee person for the 52nd Ward, 10th Division. I'm on the membership committee for the steering group for Open Wards. And get out and vote. Tell your play cousin to vote. Get everybody you know to get out and vote. All right, that's it.
All right, and perfect timing. Steph, we're doing just quick intros of the steering committee members. If you want to jump in real quick.
Hi everyone, Steph Davis, she, they. I'm on the steering committee, part of the membership committee, and thanks everyone for being here. Hopefully we can talk in the chat about experiences during ward reorg. Thank you.
Absolutely, and definitely in the Facebook group, folks. If you're not part of the Facebook group yet, that's a great place to flag questions, thoughts, concerns on a rolling basis and get answers or responses right away. Before I forget. Just with that roll call of the steering committee members, the current steering committee members, this Open Awards Philly group has its own elections coming up in June. Our bylaws say that every June in even numbered years, all 9 seats on the steering committee come up. We haven't pinned down a date yet, and got to refresh the procedures from the last election, actually our inaugural election in June of 2020. But stay tuned for that. If you are very much interested in running. Of course, we encourage everyone who's committed to the Open Awards work to do so, and just stay tuned on that front. But again, that'll take place sometime in June, date to be determined. So we're gonna jump right into it. We got a lot of ground to cover, and I'll stress what we've stressed before in prior meetings, which is that this is obviously like a hyper-informed, hyper-engaged group with a great deal of experience and expertise. So both on the election day front, which I think we'll go through pretty quick, would welcome any other thoughts or tips or recommendations from the whole group here, as well as the steering committee members. And then on the ward reorganization side, in that discussion in the latter half plus of the meeting tonight, we have a few folks who've volunteered to share some of their experience from the last time this went down, 4 years ago. But we'll certainly have time for questions, and then anyone else, if there's time to share their 2 cents about what they've encountered in the past, would be instructive and helpful. Obviously, on the Democratic and Republican side, there's plenty of language in the bylaws about how this stuff is supposed to work, but how it works in reality is something else altogether. So that's what we hope to get out of this evening is for everybody to have some sense of how this can happen. And there are certainly folks in the room here who are very much engaged in preparing for these reorg meetings already, and perhaps you potentially having a leadership change. If there isn't that sort of organizing in your ward already, there isn't that much of an on ramp to get that set. But still, we wanted to make sure everyone had a full kind of scope picture about how these things can work. So with that, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that my internet stays smooth and with me here. I'm going to throw up a few slides just on the election day front first. And again, I'm going to try to pause a couple times, and I would welcome, again, other tips and recommendations from the other steering committee folks and other folks here in the group on how this can happen. when we put this first slide together, we had a whole lot of timeline here, and obviously by today there isn't that much timeline left, right? The requests for mail-in ballots were due a couple hours ago, and I'm sure almost everyone here is running for committee person this primary on May 17th. So I'm sure you're grinding already to either get mailers out or dropping off flyers or knocking on doors. All doing all that sort of stuff already this week. I guess we'll keep moving to the kind of the more rules section, but I'm sure everybody has a different rhythm of this. It's a long day on May 17th. Certainly want to make sure you give yourself a little bit of time to rest, get something to eat, have some water with you. Don't wear yourself down. Hopefully we have decent weather. But there's a little bit of a rhythm that I think a lot of folks have gotten into as far as greeting folks at the polls, right? Have your literature ready to go, know what your button number is, have a nice big smile on your face, welcome them in. Depending on how closely you're tracking who's actually showing up at the polls and who's casting ballots, and you might go and knock on doors in the middle of the day. It just kind of depends on the kind of rigor and sophistication of the campaign that you're running. But obviously, like I think for most of you, you'll spend the better part of the day at the polling place and just kind of greeting folks. Actually, on that point, before I skip into kind of some of what the high level rules are, of the steering committee members in particular, there's anything else you guys would want to stress on this side, just election day, and maybe what your kind of rough schedule, what your rhythm will be over the course of that 12, 13 hours. So I presume it's going to be something like this.
I'll take that question to start it off. I'm a new committee person, elected 4 years ago. I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. Last year, our polls did not open until 11 a.m. One board worker, poll worker, showed up, and my fellow committee person got drafted to work on the board. I have been out away from the polls since COVID, so I was not there. It's partly my responsibility to make sure that people make it easy to vote, and that means getting involved, make sure that the polls do run smoothly. We have to do something about that. So I'm going to the polls earlier than ever before. I usually go at 9 a.m. My partner, Lori Hardinas, takes the first shift. I take the second, but I'm going to bed. I'm going to try to go to bed early and be out at the polls as close to 7 a.m. as possible. Have a phone number with you. So if things do go wrong and your poll people don't have a phone number, you have a phone number. Don't rely on everyone else to be able to solve all the problems. So that's my first tip.
I'm happy to share, and especially I don't know if there's people who are running for the first time for committee person or maybe running against incumbents, but when I ran the first time, I was at the polls the entire time, and I plan to do that as much as possible for this upcoming election next week. So there to help if the judge of elections needed help in the morning, since it will probably be a pretty light day. I know my polling place will run pretty smoothly, knock on wood, but I generally stand outside giving out a flyer to ask people to vote for me. The best tip I have is to say, because people don't really want to talk to you, so I always just go, I'm on the ballot, and then people do want to talk to you. So if your name is actually on a ballot, actually very few people I think I've met actual candidates. I think for people who are very involved in politics, we're very used to it, but most people who this is not their everyday thing and they wouldn't do this in their spare time, have not. So people usually get pretty excited and want to talk to you. And that's how I think I was successful in my first run, was literally just standing there for 12 hours, just handing people a postcard with my name on it and talking to them. And I was able to get the most votes in my division for that election 4 years ago. So I will probably be doing something very similar. We might need help at our polling place. So I might have to stop campaigning and help out, but most of the day I will be standing outside. It's a long day. Snacks.
Yeah, no, those are great tips. Actually, as I'm looking over the slide again, this is like everyone in this meeting right now knows this, but definitely do not take for granted that folks may get confused or just like forget about the deadline to get these mail-in ballots in. Even one of our local cable news outlets local news outlets the other night like messed up this deadline, suggested it was a postmark deadline, right? Just get it in the mail on election day and you'll be okay. But of course, that's not the case. So do stress, especially if you're speaking to voters over the next week, if they still have their mail-in ballots, they really have to get them in, ASAP. And by the time we're in the latter part of the week, they really need to hand deliver them to one of the drop boxes, which fortunately Philly has a decent number of those. Other counties in Pennsylvania are not so lucky, but definitely do not take for granted that for folks who are voting by mail, they got to get those ballots in snappy. And then also, if you do come across someone who comes to that polling place but requested the mail-in ballot, remember they do have to, if they want to use the voting system, they got to bring the ballot and the return envelope, the outside return envelope with that barcode to spoil. And there's a little form they got to fill out. If they do that, they can check and use the voting system as they normally would. If they forgot one or both of those things, they will not be able to use the voting system. At least they're not supposed to. They can still vote by provisional ballot, and as long as they haven't returned their mail in, that provisional ballot count. But that's kind of a cumbersome new procedure in the law from 2019, Act 77, that folks are still pretty unfamiliar with. So I just want to flag that because that still may come up at the polls. Rebecca, what do you got?
Yeah, no, there's one thing that I've started doing in the last couple of cycles, which is coming with a sheet where I've printed out a QR code that goes to the vote.pa.gov polling place lookup. Because sometimes you'll be at a polling place where more than one division vote and people are confused about which division they are voting in there, or they may need to be at a totally different polling place. So if you have that QR code and they can just plug in their address and figure out their polling place, that can really help people either figure out whether they can vote for you or where they go at the polling place you're at or another polling place. I had one other thing to say, which is about literature. When you go to the polls with literature about yourself, just be sure that you've put who's paid for it at the bottom so that you're transparent to people who are coming and you don't leave yourself vulnerable in case, someone comes and challenges your right to hand it out. That's I've found to be an important point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, great points. Great points, especially for those polling places that have multiple precincts in them, right? So when someone walks up to the wrong table, wrong precincts, their name's not on the book because it's the wrong precinct, and they turn around and walk out. Definitely want to catch each one of those folks and not lose a voter that way. That's a great tip. Okay. All right, awesome. Well, that is exactly why we open it up for everybody else to share their experience and expertise, because you get better stuff that way. All right, so we'll do just a high level of the rules. Again, I'm sure for most folks here, they're familiar with this stuff, and of course, this is not exhaustive of all the rules that are supposed to be in effect at a polling site, but they're just the ones we wanted to highlight today. And so, especially in these Philly primaries, and when we have committee person elections, the electioneering is going to be illegal. Electioneering is going to be more common. It happens actually not just in committee person primaries, but in a number of again Philly Democratic primaries. So this is when folks are campaigning inside of the voting area. They're handing out literature. They're pushing candidates. Any of that campaign or partisan activity is not allowed in that room or space where voting is taking place. What's a little fuzzy about this, so my understanding is we're talking about, again, the room or space when the machines are. So the machines are tucked away in a gymnasium, and that's where all the voting is taking place. Like the gymnasium doors is like kind of the outside line as far as where the voting area begins, right? So the 10-foot bubble we have around those gym doors is what folks should stay out of. I think probably what happens most often, regardless of where the voting systems are inside of the building, right, if it's a church or rec center or school, what have you, I think most folks are hanging out outside the building anyway, kind of regardless of where those machines are on the inside. And especially if it's nice weather, surely that's where everybody will be hanging out. But this is definitely one to flag, because whether it's people coming and going into that voting area who shouldn't be there, voters who are not in the active voting, folks who are running for committee person, the poll workers themselves, right, who are working the table, should not be doing any sort of campaign or partisan activity whatsoever. Even just talking about candidates in front of even what they think is innocent kind of discussion about candidates at the table while voters are in there. They should not be doing. And there's a very clear list of individuals who should be inside that voting area. Again, poll workers, voters who are actually voting, not voters who voted like earlier in the morning, wanted to come back and hang out, voters who are actually in there to cast their ballots. Of course, people who are brought in to assist a voter, whether it's for a disability of some sort or for language access purposes, any individual who's going into that polling place to assist in that capacity either has to indicate that in the voter registration record, or that person has to fill out a form, a declaration that they're assisting the person. But those folks are also allowed to come in if the voters requesting them. The poll watchers, of course, and we have a slide, and I'm sure we're gonna have some good commentary here about the poll watchers in just a minute. Obviously, county election staff, and then hopefully not too often, any sort of law enforcement staff who are requested by the judge of elections, which in most cases will be district attorney personnel and detectives. Hopefully not in any instances police, Philadelphia police, but the district attorney's office still has a task force out there, and they still zip out mobile teams of DAs and detectives when folks have stuff to report. Which I guess is where I'll flag the hotline here, that 686-9641 number. That's been the same number for the DA's office for election purposes for many years. It should be open all day long. They should have both English and Spanish speaking staff on that hotline. And this is the number to call if there's any potential violation of election law. This is who you call. Again, obviously harassment or intimidation, but potential fraud or other behaviors that are across the line. You take it straight there. I mean, the commissioner's office are responsible for administering the election, but they are not responsible for enforcing the election code. It's the DA's office that's responsible for that. So this is a number to jot down. Obviously, like we'll send the slide deck out afterwards and post it to the website, and this number will be out there and about over the next week, and hopefully the DA's office will have a press statement and a press conference about this. But if you don't have that number already, that's one to mark down just in case something is happening out there. So I'll pause there again. Here, Michael, kick it to you. What thought, comment, tip?
Yeah, being electioneering also includes not wearing a button, not wearing a shirt that might be promoting your candidate. So if someone's wearing a t-shirt, they got to take it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. Well, yes. And my understanding is as a voter who has like a button, they can go on in and come on out. But the poll workers, right? Poll workers certainly cannot have any sort of campaign paraphernalia or buttons or hats or anything of that sort. Yeah, all that stuff has got to stay out of that voting area. Absolutely. Here, while we're here, is any other again, tips or recommendations or brief experiences that might be instructive on this topic? Because this is kind of a tough one. I mean, I'll acknowledge that like the district attorney's office, even though they staff up dozens or sometimes scores of personnel to be on hand on election day. It's a big city, and more often than not, they're being dispatched from downtown. And often, like folks gotta make do out there at a polling place, right? The folks with the certificates, obviously the judge of elections and the poll workers. So hopefully, in most circumstances, the folks there at the polling site will be able to manage the issues smoothly and correctly. But let me just open it up one more second. Yeah, Vanessa, you got the.
I would just say the judge of election is like they're in charge. So wherever they decide that 10 feet rule is. For my polling place, we have 3 sets of doors. And so our judge of election counts the most inner as our that's where the 10 feet starts, which is nice because then if it is raining, you're allowed to be inside, and it's a big space. So it's like not crowded. but people will like often kind of try to call it out, and it's like the judge gets to decide that where that demarcation is. And so the judge is in charge, and as long as they are giving the appropriate amount of space, like there's no point arguing that, I think. And, you know, if it is raining, of course, ask if it's possible to be inside. Like, you know, there's definite rules. You don't want to be intimidating voters, but like, if there's a way to like make it work. I know our area, we have like a little atrium where people can stand inside if it's raining. And I think it's nice that they let us, because you don't want to be in the rain for 12 hours. So it's like encouraging. And I know there's a lot of questions about poll watchers or poll observers. They're allowed to be inside. They must act nonpartisan, even if they are there on behalf of a party or a candidate. They are there to observe the election and see if there's any things that seem out of line and incorrect, so that they can bring the appropriate challenges or make sure voters are able to vote. That's their purpose.
Yeah, that's a great point to stress, especially about the judge. Yeah, it's their call, their judgments to where that line is, especially if it's kind of a little fuzzy in a given location. Rebecca.
Yeah, I would add one more thing for thinking about being outside the polls, outside the polling place where you're handing out literature. You know, I think it's rare, but it occasionally can happen that somebody may try and intimidate you out there, or make you feel bad about running, or even try and take your materials. So, you know, thinking about the sort of the way you keep your materials in a bag, like when you're canvassing, you keep control of the clipboard, you know, you have your literature to hand out, don't put it on a table somewhere. And maybe think about bringing a friend to be with you and keep you company. Or if there's somebody else who's, you know, running for committee person in the area that you're an ally with, like, don't just try and do shifts throughout the day. I think it's important to be there with allies, with company.
Yeah, those points are very, very well taken. Very well taken. Yeah, and I'll just to Michael's point earlier. Again, it's the voters can have stuff with them as long as they're going and coming out just casting their ballots. But I guess, Michael, your point, certainly for those of you who are actually running, if you got buttons or if you got a hat or whatever your gear is, you do want to cover that up or take it off real quick before you go into that polling place. If you have a poll officer certificate, of course, which will be the last topic we have here before we move on to ward meeting. So. Yeah, why don't we? Oh, actually, there was one other question here. For the commissioner's office, administrative issues like a late poll opening. There's another set of numbers that folks can call there, and again, we'll drop these in the chat. They're also listed in the poll worker manual that has improved substantially in the commissioner's office over the past 10 years or so. There's a whole set of numbers in that manual, and in fact, actually, that manual provides an excellent overview over a lot of the rules and procedures we're talking about this evening. But if it's like late poll opening or running out of materials, the poll workers are primarily responsible for calling that stuff in. But there's also a general number. I'm pretty sure it's 686-1590 that anyone else can call if there's an administrative issue at a polling place that the commissioners need to deal with. So that's a kind of a clear marker we wanted to set out. Is administrative stuff is the commissioner's office. Potential violations of election law is the DA's office. All right, here, which brings us to the last topic, which has actually been referenced a couple times. So poll watcher certificates. There's been a page on PhiladelphiaVotes.com if you haven't requested these certificates yet, which I'm sure everyone here would strongly recommend that you do this so that you and someone else, a colleague, can go inside that polling place at times. These are the basic duties, right? Poll watchers are allowed to make challenges to voters' qualifications on the grounds of identity or residency. I don't think that happens all that often, but it is kind of a check that's put into our election code. Again, for those of you who are keeping track of who's showing up, right? You've had a very tight list of voters you've been reaching out to. You are allowed to look at the poll book and see who's checked in and who's cast ballots. Very critically, though, you can only do that when there are no voters in the polling site. So if it's pretty busy, long line of voters, you won't have a good chance to do that. You can also get counts of the votes tallied on the voting systems as well, right? And see if those line up. And then, of course, because you will be on the inside, right, you'll have eyes and ears on the space. And if anything is happening that should not be happening, reporting that to the judge of elections, or if you feel like you need to, reporting it directly to the DA's office or to the commissioner's office. So those are kind of the basic duties. And again, each committee person candidate here as a candidate, you can request up to two of these certificates. So this is definitely one more topic. Let's open up the floor real quick. Other tips, recommendations, thoughts from those folks who've done this a lot, things that people would want to keep in mind on their certificate side, poll watcher certificate side.
I got one more tip, which is not about poll watchers, but if you're a committee person and you're thinking about starting a newsletter, it's a great time to bring a clipboard with a form to have people sign up for your newsletter. It only takes a couple minutes, so just real quick form with their name, address, telephone number, and email address, and you have the start of a newsletter for the next election.
Yeah.
I have one more tip, although with a caveat that if it feels too complicated, then don't do it. I mean, if you're running for committee person, the most important thing is greeting the voters as they come and saying, hey, I'm on the ballot, and giving them their literature, but your literature. But if you have a poll watcher's certificate and you are able to print out what's called a strike list of all the voters in your party, in your division, in an alphabetical arrangement, then if you find a time when there's no voting going on, you can go and inspect the list of people who have voted already and check off people pretty easily if it's that alphabetized kind of strike list. If you don't have that and you just have the regular by street and address list, it's impossible to do that. But the nice thing about that is if you do it in the middle of the day on an alphabetical list, then you can spend time, sure, you could go door to door, or you could call people if the numbers are on that list. And if you have access to VoterWeb, there is a feature on the homepage to print out a strike list format rather than the walk list by address. But again, if this feels too complicated, don't worry about it. Stay outside, hand out your literature, say I'm on the ballot.
Right on.
I have one other thing for poll watching. So, as hard as it can be sometimes, like with how acrimonious it can be, like with your judge of elections or your other committee people, it is important to just remember to be kind to your poll workers. And it goes a long way when it's time to do your job as a poll watcher. And they understand that that's a part of the landscape. My committee person and I sometimes don't get along so great, but we know that we're out here for our community, and that like when I come in to poll watch, we just do it as quickly as possible so we can both get on with what we're really there to do that day, which for me is electioneering, and for them is just trying to make sure everybody can vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent stuff all around. I think that's exactly what we wanted to get through on the election day front. And we're actually kind of right on time to move on to the next topic. So perfect. Thanks so much. All right. So
Steve had a question.
Oh, we do. Sorry. Fire away.
About getting a poll watcher certificate. If you are running for office, including committee person, you can go to philadelphiavotes.com and submit a request to get a poll watcher certificate. If you're not running for office or not a committee person, you would need to get one from your ward leader, from your party, or from one of the candidates. So that's the other way of getting a poll watcher certificate, by working for one of the candidates.
Yep. All right, great. So here, we'll keep moving here. So we try to end as close to 8 o'clock as possible. The other, and appreciate everyone's patience with us, like trying to squeeze two pretty big topics into one evening. So election day was the first 30 minutes, obviously. So we're gonna spend the latter half of the meeting on ward reorganization meetings, right? These are those meetings that are supposed to take place. It was the third Monday after the election. Supposed to be at 8 o'clock, at least according to city committee bylaws. And there are a number of different rules as to how these are supposed to go down. I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone in this room, like that these happen in all sorts of different ways across the city of Philadelphia. So again, the objective here is to give everyone a sense of what this can look like, and then what you can do to kind of prepare for that day, especially if you're trying to have some sort of influence on the election of ward leadership and on the outcome. So these are just a few thoughts and questions we jotted down ahead of time. I think most helpful is we got a number of folks here who have volunteered to share a little bit of their experience in these reorg meetings in the past. But just to start, this is some stuff we thought would be helpful for folks to keep in mind. And this goes without saying. I know a lot of people here are doing this already, but you really want to connect with the other folks in your neighborhood, in your community, in your ward ahead of time. I'm sure a lot of you have been doing this already because you're community leaders and involved in the neighborhood. But especially as it pertains to this meeting and what can happen or not happen, connecting with other folks and getting a sense of what they want to see in the ward, if they have specific goals of some sort, or maybe they don't. That's pretty helpful to know ahead of time, as opposed to just kind of walking into the space, not really knowing who else is going to be there and what they want to see happen. You may have a sense already of who's seeking the leadership posts in your ward, right? Ward leadership and ward chair, all the other officers, maybe a bunch of folks who have held these positions already. There could be some other folks who are seeking this positions newly, and maybe there may be a contested election there, but of course helpful to find out who's seeking the job. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. There's going to be a great deal of variance across the city and by ward, how the selection actually takes place, right? Is there an actual process, step by step that'll be followed? Is that process written down somewhere? And regardless of how sophisticated it is, whether it's a simple kind of like hands raised, voice vote, writing something down on a piece of paper, ranked choice voting, like whatever it is, like is there an actual process or procedure that is understood by everybody and accepted by everybody as to how this is going to happen? And then also, to what extent will the people seeking these positions have a chance to make their case, either before that day or certainly on the day of the meeting, which again, I'm sure that varies dramatically across the city of Philadelphia. So again, I just want to put a few thoughts out there, a few thoughts or questions out there for you to think on as folks are speaking, but to, I think, really provide the value for this evening. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to each of the several folks who volunteer to share a little bit. I think we'll try to go in order of ward number, because we do alphabetical so much, first name or last name. We'll go by ward number. So you got 4 or 5 folks here, and Dana from the first, Ms. Pavlichko, if you want to go first, maybe again like 5, 6, 7 minutes or so, just kind of what you've experienced in the past, and just like the first part of the meeting, any kind of tips or recommendations, things you think people should keep in mind for this. And I'm going to take us off. I'll take us off the deck so we can see each other too. There we go.
Hi, I'm Dana, she, her. I'm in the first ward. I was an elected committee person for the first time in Division 11 4 years ago. I've very recently moved, so now I'm running in 120, but it's only across the street from my old division. So I'd say that running initially, it was a ward that was not very transparent in how they did things. So we didn't really know what we were going to be walking into. But I should also probably define we. There were a lot of people who decided to run for committee person who had never run before 4 years ago, especially in my ward. So we had 21 divisions, so it's 42 committee people, Democratic committee people. A vast wound up being like, I think a super majority wound up winning. And those were people who were decided to run on their own, decided to run through like being in contact or inspired by different organizations. And all of the folks who were new who ran wound up being people who had very progressive values and were also very interested in being able to create endorsements with their committee person seat instead of taking Bob Brady's endorsements. So that was a lot. That was an important piece, I think, to be the impetus for wanting to open up the ward. So immediately after the election, you see who won each division, and there was some understanding, like some people knew each other and where their politics were and what their goals were for getting that committee person seat, but some people were a little unknown. So it took a lot of just organizing and reaching out to people and even meeting with them one-on-one to kind of get a sense of what their values are, to get a sense of what they want to do with the position and how they felt about how things were running versus where they want to take things. And through that, that's how we figured out that we did have a super majority, I think, or maybe it was just a regular majority, a majority of people who wanted an open ward. And so to prepare, so that was stuff that happened leading up to the election and then immediately after the election, and had to get done really fast. So I remember I didn't make a ton of plans after the election between then and like June 6th, because there was a lot of stuff that had to get worked out. And we all pre-pandemic wound up meeting up in person once we kind of figured out who those people were, to figure out how we were going to handle the ward reorganization meeting. At the ward reorganization meeting, you have to bring a certificate. The city will send you, for me, it was this big blue sheet of paper that said, congratulations, you're a committee person, this is the proof. Generally, I mean, depends on who you talk to. It's recommended you don't actually take that certificate to the meeting, like photocopy it, because if you're going into a hostile situation, someone could take it. So bring your photocopy of your official certificate to the ward reorganization meeting. We had also planned ahead of time how to show solidarity, and also we planned for a couple contingencies. We all got very familiar with the actual rules of the ward system. Like just read over that, like, what is it, 1948 guidebook, and get familiar with the Roberts Rules of Order and how stuff works. Just knowing the system helps a lot. It also helps because sometimes people don't follow the system. So it's at least good to have some sort of baseline. We also met, since it was a majority of people, we knew that if we had the votes and were able to have a fair election in that reorganization meeting, the next thing that would happen would be a steering committee essentially is elected, the ward leader, first vice chair, second, third, etc. I am very interested in transparency and stuff, so I volunteered to be the secretary. So in that role, pretty much immediately, I made sure that we're always taking notes. And I'd recommend, you can't record people speaking without their permission in this state. So just take notes on what's happening, maybe get to know the faces of people as much as you can ahead of time to kind of know who is that person, do as much research as you can. It helps. And I realized that it can be very difficult, but it does help to understand people's motivations and who people are and what's happening, because it happens very fast. So yeah, we pretty much whipped votes to get people in the same room beforehand. We figured out in an in-person meeting who would be each of those 9 roles. And then as soon as, oh God, this was 4 years ago, so my memory is a little fuzzy, but as soon as, I think it's the ward leader, that is the first thing that is elected. So as soon as there was a change in ward leader, the whole tone of the room changed. And we also made sure that everything was done by, I think, raised hands, so that it was very clear. You can also request a ballot, written ballot, because you don't, it's a tense situation sometimes because there's a lot of power involved. So, some people might not want to vote that publicly, and you can make a motion to do certain things, I don't know if it's always going to be respected. Can't guarantee that. But after the ward leader switch, all the other positions were like quickly filled, and it was, and I was like taking notes of like how many people were voting for what and like who was voting like yes, no, and all that stuff. So that immediately after the meeting, like I was then secretary, and then that we can start like posting minutes. So that's kind of how we did it to make sure like from that point on it was very transparent.
Awesome.
I might have
Perfect.
missed stuff.
No, perfect. That was no perfect, like exactly what we're looking for. And why don't we do this? Why don't we hold off for questions just because we have a number of folks to go through, and then with the time we have at the end, we'll kind of open it up then. So after the first, the next would be the ninth. So Karen Bojar, like senior advisor to Open Words Philly, informal title, and can give us a sense of the ninth, which probably has the longest record of smooth transition of power, probably from one regime to the next. Karen, over to you. Oh, here, got to come off mute real quick. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Okay, now. I served as a committee person in the 9th Ward for over 30 years, which is ridiculous for anybody to be a committee person that long. It was smooth sailing every reorganization meeting. I did not realize until I did the research for Green Shoots of Democracy how unusual we are. I don't have any of the little horror stories to tell that you hear from other wards. We had a few contested elections, and even when there were contested elections, it was all very civil. The last reorganization meeting I did not attend because that was in 2018. I did not run for committee person then. You have to be an elected committee person to get into the meeting. And that's something that I think all the wards, the open wards do adhere to. You can't get in if you don't have that certificate, which is fine. Well, I of course heard about the meeting, and it was, as usual, very civil, even though what was going on, we had a situation which could, in many wards, have become ugly and contentious, but in our ward, it did not. There were people who were unhappy with the current ward leader, Chris Rabb. So one person ran against him, and it was Chris won, but it was a very close election. And there was some dissatisfaction expressed, but I think everyone conducted themselves quite well, and we moved on. And there was another contested ward leader election, which I recall in the 80s, and that was also very smooth, no problems. So I was so surprised when I started learning about what went on in other wards. Now, I think if you have a culture, if the ward culture does value democracy and transparency, then everything kind of takes care of itself. You come to the meeting, nobody's trying to keep anybody out. If it's a contested election, the candidates give their pitch, then we vote. We've tended to have open votes. Our ward bylaws do say that if people request a secret ballot, then we'll take a vote and we'll decide and we can have it. But the culture of the ward pretty much has been, I can't really remember any secret ballots. And I think a lot of people believe that since we are elected, our constituents have a right to know how we vote, and therefore we should have open votes. Now, of course, the counter argument is that there are people who may fear retaliation. I don't think anybody had any fears of retaliation from a ward leader in the 9th Ward, so it just wasn't an issue. This does not mean that everything is nirvana in the 9th Ward. We've had our problems, but they haven't been problems that are related to democracy and transparency and lack thereof. The problems that we have had have been maybe two people not liking each other and their personal hostilities spilling over. But people have always respected the rules, and we've managed to handle that. I'm getting a little off topic here because this happens in any group. Look, whenever you have people, you have individuals who clash. But the culture of the ward has been such that we've been able to handle that. And the personality issues such as we've had have never spilled over into the ward reorganization meeting. So it's an atypical experience. I don't know whether anybody has any questions about my really rather boring tale of harmony in the Ninth Ward.
No, Karen, that's perfect. And if only all elections these days in the United States were boring, that would be fantastic.
You're absolutely right.
So, yeah, what we'll keep it we'll keep it moving. And just a heads up, we may go a bit past 8 o'clock. Just want to make sure everybody has a good chance to hear about these experiences. So continuing in number of by ward number, Rebecca in the 21st, and then Michael in the 22nd. We'll close it out. Maybe a little bit different experience than from the 9th ward. So Rebecca, why don't you go first?
Oh, I didn't realize we were going to skip so quickly from 9 to 21. Well, the 21st ward is a different ward in that it's a huge ward. There are 45 divisions, which means if all the spots are filled, that's 90 people. And they're not always all filled, but to get a majority in such a big ward is a complicated task. And you know, our group who've been wanting a more progressive, transparent, democratic kind of culture have been at it for a couple of seasons now. I started volunteering in 2012, and my first time running was 2014, and then 2018, and now 2022. And thinking about 2018, I mean, we had some lessons we'd learned from 2014 when we were maybe just 9 of us, you know, hi, we're here, we're progressive, we think we could do things differently. You know, 2018, we had a sizable number of people. But I think one of the things that I was listening to the person from the first ward, I think, you know, coordinating and talking beforehand is really key. And as much as we tried to do that, I think there was more to be done. In part, one of the things that I remember happening was the doors got locked at 8 o'clock precisely. And there were new people who got there a little late because they were trying to find the place, and there had been no notice that the doors would lock at 8. So people arrived at 8:01, 8:02, and you know, Sergeant at Arms and other people at the door said, sorry, you're out of luck. You can't come in. So, you know, some of our people were locked out. And when people are going to take a measure of who's in the room, and if they don't feel like there's a majority, they may not vote with you even if they want to, because they may fear retaliation. So I think everything does follow from that first vote for ward leader. And that follows from all the work between the election or even before the election and the ward reorganization meeting. One thing to remember is that it will go very quickly, and there will be people who know Robert's Rules of Order better than you or me, or who are driving the meeting. And people have to be prepared to jump in. And if you're more used to the classroom or a professional setting, you may not be as comfortable jumping in and saying, I object, or proxy's not allowed, but you want to practice that. You want several people ready. You know, for example, I just said proxy's not allowed. One of the rules, and I think the city bylaws, is that proxies are not allowed unless people vote to allow them in the ward reorganization meeting, meaning, you know, if there are people say, I don't want to come here, I'll give you my proxy, you can vote for me. Sometimes ward leaders or other people will collect proxies from people and come in, and they've got, you know, 8 votes that they will cast for whoever. The bylaws say proxies are not allowed. And if you want to have a vote in which everybody is present to vote, you know, the bylaws are on your side. And if someone says motion for proxies, you got to have 5 people ready to go. Proxies not allowed. I object. Boom. Very quickly, because otherwise someone will make a motion for it. It'll be approved and the proxies will be allowed. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you want to hear from me. I think you got these 2 great images of, if not Nirvana, the boring, the boring 9th ward, and the really well organized transition in the 1st ward. Anything else you have questions about?
Mhm. Well, I think that's perfect right now. I mean, I think sure, like one strong theme we're hearing is like you got to get organized ahead of time, right? Got not get organized, make connections, but like have a plan. I mean, if you're really trying to make for a change in the ward leadership, there's got to be a plan, and people got to be ready to go. I think that that point is very, very well taken. So why don't we do this, Michael? Do you want to give you a quick rundown of the 22nd, which is also, you know, not a smooth set of circumstances, and then with the time we have left, again, even if we go a little bit over, if folks are willing to hang, field questions from the group. But Michael, you want to follow blast with the 22nd?
Sure. Yeah, you do need to be organized ahead of time. You need to meet with the other committee people that have been elected. 4 years ago, a number of us were recruited from neighborhood networks, and we met several times under their auspices. And we came out of it thinking, we're going to be a bunch of independent people. So we're going to go to this reorg meeting and we're going to vote as independents. Well, you're not going to be a block that way. So this time out, we are going to invite like-minded, independent committee people who are not aligned with the current ward leader to a meeting, and we hope to be able to organize that way. So one of the things that I did 4 years ago before the reorg meeting was to send every known candidate at the time a questionnaire. And I sent them to all the questionnaires to everyone that I knew that would be running, and got some answers. So maybe if you know who's running and you have their email addresses, send everyone a questionnaire to get an idea of where they're coming from. So in terms of Robert's Rules of Order, we don't use that in our ward. I tried, I got shouted down a couple years ago, but some of these ward reorganization meetings, yeah, they do go fast. You know, our former ward leader, well, I won't say his name, but he retired 4 years ago. So there were 4 people running, and the ward leader at the time handles the whole show until the end of the meeting. And that ward leader, he liked to shouting all the time. So Robert's Rules of Order doesn't apply when you have a person running a meeting who likes to shout. So be organized, meet ahead of time, and try to get to know who the candidates are going to be. That's it.
Okay, perfect. So we have about 4 minutes to 8 o'clock. For folks who are willing to stay past 8, including our the folks who volunteered to share their experiences from their respective wards, that'd be great if you can hang around for just a little bit longer. But if you are going to take off at 8 o'clock, we will get a follow-up email out with a slide deck. We'll try to summarize the points that were made this evening. And again, you know, one of the value adds of this little project here is that folks can connect with each other across wards. So the Facebook group is one place to do that, short of tracking down someone personally with their name and email. But again, if you're trying to make specific connections across wards, just let us know. That is one of the things we're trying to do. So with that, a little disclaimer, out of the way. questions of the folks who just spoke, or thoughts from any of the steering committee folks? Vanessa, do you want to go real quick?
I'll just throw one thing out there just to piggyback off Michael saying, knowing who's running, or who's won, but we still have a week left. So one thing with the ward reorgs is that the only people who get the vote are the people who are elected committee person. And there are a lot of open divisions where no committee person is running. And that means the ward leader has an advantage or one less person person that can fill in and appoint to that seat. So if you see there's empty positions and you can get a friend to get written in, like 5 people write them in, you can pick up some seats if you are thinking of a takeover situation. So you can pull those lists and see where there's empty divisions where no one is filed a
Actually,
petition to run.
Vanessa,
Yeah.
I don't think that people appointed by the ward leader are allowed to vote in the reorg meeting.
Well,
by the
you're
bylaws.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's
I think
only people.
For my
with
situation, it's an advantage. It's an advantage for them to leave them open and not have more people, I think, in my situation.
But it's always good to run right.
Yeah.
I did want to,
Yeah.
right, and Sergio just said, but I'm sure some ward leaders would try
Yeah.
if you didn't know that. And I wanted to respond to
Or
Jamie's,
appoint them for next time.
sure, Jamie's question. What if we suspect that something dishonest is happening? Something else happened in the previous ward reorganization meeting. The ward leader was proposing a new position that didn't exist in the bylaws to get another person in on their slate. And we called it, we had people come in and say, hey, that's a change in the bylaws. If you want to do that, that belongs later in the meeting. And if you want to do a change to the bylaws, then we get to propose our a democratic endorsement process. And we pushed back and they backed off. So when dishonest things happen in that sphere, it's very much about power and organized power and being able to call people on it. Much as we all want a world in which there's, the arbiter of, what's honest and what's right to kind of swoop in and say, hey, that's not right. Let's do things right. What's really hard and disconcerting about this arena is how much it depends on the power that you organize. And so going in, the best way to deal with dishonest things is to know that they're dishonest and to go in there feeling strong and able to name them, and to name them in ways that will bring other people along with you in the room and not alienate them. So if you can find a way to frame the narrative, you may end up picking up extra votes by challenging someone who other people were intimidated by, but weren't feeling empowered enough to stand up to. So that's what I would say to Jamie's question.
Yeah, that's great. Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm from the mighty 22nd. Which the old board committee people refer to, but don't know what that means. But we have an additional complications this time around, even if we get committee people elected that are on our side. And that's that our ward leader 2 years ago unilaterally kicked our progressive wing out of the ward. And we have not been invited to meetings for 2 years. So we are not sure whether, even if we're holding that blue certificate, we're getting in the room. So that's something that we're trying to figure out. You have to figure out how we're getting in that room.
Yeah. And provide some scrutiny ahead of time to provide some pressure to not hide the meeting or keep you all out ahead of time. Yep. Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one. Sergio, do you have a question you want to throw in the mix?
Yeah, sorry, I was late, so maybe this was already covered. I was wondering if the bylaws say specifically about where they have to happen. I know we're all in like the pandemic, we've all been meeting virtually. Is there rules against virtuals reorg meetings? Because I'm scared about how the ward can use that to their advantage. And then the other question I had is, have folks tried to get reporters like to be involved in these things. I know they can't be there, but if we're can you live stream the meeting or something like that so that there are other eyes on the situation? Because I do anticipate in my ward meeting that they're going to be dishonest and try to do everything they can.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's really welcome collective,
Yes.
like collective, response from the group here. I mean, as far as like filming in the meeting, I don't think there's a law or rule that says you can't do that. We're in city committee bylaws or, anywhere else in city or state law. It may get a bit tense if or when someone has their phone out and filming, but that would be one way to document what's happening. I mean, the bylaws say that the reorg meeting has to take place at the same place as the last preceding meeting, which again, like in a lot of wards, probably doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot when they're not having regular meetings in the first place. So I'd welcome responses from the group on that, like what to expect as far as where these meetings will happen and would a virtual meeting be acceptable or possible. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I thought about that, and like if the last meeting was on Zoom, does it necessarily mean that the reorg meeting will be on Zoom? That's a great question. One piece of advice I would really recommend, we have been posting the open wards information on the city committee rules. Read them, study them, get to know them a little bit better. Knowing the city committee rules for us Democrats is probably better than knowing Robert's Rules of Order. In the 22nd, yeah, we are concerned about are we gonna be let in? If you look on our Facebook page, you'll see that there is a link to a letter that got published with my name on it in the Chestnut Hill Local. It talks about, some of the things that have happened and not happened, like not being invited to a ward meeting for the last 2 years. We just hope that it will have intimidated our ward leader enough to make it shine a light on her and let us into the next meeting. Some people have suggested, contact all the reporters that tell them about your ward meeting and invite them to attend. Well, if it's a Zoom meeting, I don't think they would be able to attend. But we have to shed light on the fact, and we have to demand that we want our meetings run democratically. I mean, if for example, our ward leader does not invite us to a ward meeting, there will be a lawsuit. There will. But we hope it doesn't come to that. We want to represent our voters. We're elected, so that's the purpose of this group here, is to lend aid and support to each one of us, to say that, we're not alone. And right, we need to go into the meeting being strong. And that's what we hope for.
Other thoughts on that again? How to address when and where this meeting will be, especially where? Yeah, Rebecca.
Well, the question of whether you can get other eyes on the meeting is a good one. And I don't think it's settled whether, other Democratic voters who aren't elected committee people, can't come in. I mean, or Republican, or, I think it goes to, people will say that it's a private organization and it can restrict its membership. But if you go to city bylaws and you go to the state bylaws, there may be some discrepancy about who is entitled to attend any meeting, business meetings. So, I think that's worth kind of digging into and figuring out whether there's an argument for that. And you could also, you could organize people. You could organize a lot of people to come who hadn't been elected, who say, you're doing business in our name. We elected you. We're really interested in seeing the proceedings. Do you really want to keep us out? That, I mean, they could be kept out. They might be brought in, but either way, that's a powerful statement. So you could consider that.
Yeah. No, that all sounds good. Okay, we're about 7 minutes past. Any other final burning questions folks wanted to put out there to the whole group or to any one of the kind of panelists?
It's Karen. I wanted to make a comment on what Rebecca said. There is a body of law which, and people should consult Irv Ecclesburg if you want to know more about this, because he did use these decisions in the Tracy Gordon case. A body of law which does argue that when the Democratic Party is involved in state actions, such as the conduct of elections, then it cannot hide behind where private organization can do whatever we want if they are involved in state action. Now, the body, there was a Supreme Court decision in 1966, a long time ago, but definitely ruled in favor of a group of aggrieved committee persons who were not seated by the ward leader. And the judge ruled, it was Bentman versus the 7th Ward. The judge ruled that since the party was involved in state action, it could not act like a private club. So there are possibilities for pursuing this. And I think the climate now would even be more favorable to not entertaining the idea that the party is a private club, which can do whatever it wants. It has too much power over the conduct of elections to really make a compelling case that it's just a club which can do what it wants. So I hope that wards in which people have been denied their rights as committee persons will take this to court. I know it's a problem because lawyers cost money. We were very lucky in Tracy Gordon case because Irv did it pro bono because he really believed in it. I'm sure there are other lawyers around who would, and I'm sure there are ways of raising money, but it's time that this party needs to be challenged. They're kind of like a wounded beast right now, really angry that there have been these victories in the 1st and 2nd Ward and in West Philly, and they're really fighting back. I'm sure you've read all the articles. And I've heard some people I know who are kind of loosely connected to the Democratic Party are starting to repeat this line that they're hurting our party, these people, they're creating problems for us. A real hostility towards groups such as Neighborhood Networks, Working Families Party. I think many people who identify as progressive view these groups as perfectly welcome elements within the Democratic Party, but there is real opposition to them now. I think this is a time when people who have had their rights denied them as committee persons, you've got to fight back now. Just can't put up with this any longer. So anyway, that's it. And I really do have to get off right now. Okay.
All right, Karen, thanks so much.
Okay.
All right. So here, maybe I'll do this. I'll call out. Steph Davis just made, I think, a really important point in the chat that we can close with, which is, regardless of what happens in the ward reorg meetings, right? And I think we heard like loud and clear that to really affect an actual change in leadership, it takes a great deal of time and effort and organizing. If none of that has been happening at all in your ward, I'm not sure what could be done between now and June 6th. But there are varying initiatives of varying degrees of maturity across the city to at least in some parts of the city to actually affect some changes. But again, if a change in leadership is not possible, right, and you're kind of stuck in a ward where it's a complete close, no regular meetings, no democratic process or GUTV work or whatever, there are other things you can do. I mean, there's some committee people who They do a terrific job just in their division. It actually kind of reminds me as a classroom teacher here in the city of Philadelphia, like I found like a lot of the best teachers, like they just had to close their door and focus on being, having an amazing classroom space, regardless of what else is happening in the school. It could be, for some folks, it may be like that in your ward, like do an outstanding job in your division, make sure folks are informed, get out the vote and do what you can. There may well be numbers to do a bit more than that and establish a caucus of some sorts, like the folks up in the 22nd, where you can do, if not full-fledged endorsements of your own, certainly do GOTV. And I'm sure everybody here is well aware of the stakes this year. Obviously, we have a big municipal election 23, and then another presidential right behind that. So there's all sorts of things that can be done, regardless of what kind of ward you're in and what happens in this ward reorg meeting. So I just want to, that's a really important point that Steph Dave just made, and wanted to call that out, because it's not like a black and white all or not set of circumstances. And like, I guess Rebecca, like you guys have been doing this work for a number of seasons now, like a number of years, right? And just doing GOTV for a while, like really impressive, measurable GOTV. So the folks in the 22nd. So I think that's a really important point to close out here. All right, folks. Well, it's 13 minutes after. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to keep open the room just because I want to copy and paste like all the great stuff in the chat. We will try to get a summary email out soon, but again, if you want to connect with folks, the Facebook group is probably the best place to go. If you're trying to reach someone in particular, just drop us a note at our email, openwordsphilly@gmail.com, and we'll try to get you connected with whoever you're trying to reach. All right. So best of luck over the next week. Get some rest, and yeah, again, good luck on election day. All right, we'll certainly be in touch. See you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.